In the heart of Brooklyn, New York, a notorious figure that would later shake the foundation of American law enforcement was born. The year was 1899, and Alphonse Gabriel Capone, known to history as Al Capone, entered the world the fourth of 9 children to poor Italian immigrants, Gabriel and Teresina Capone. His parents had left their homeland, seeking a better life in the land of opportunity, but found themselves in the rough and tumble neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Raised amidst the clamor and chaos of these bustling streets, young Al Capone was exposed early on to the harsh realities of the world. His father, a barber, and his mother, a seamstress, worked tirelessly to put food on the table, but their efforts often fell short. This struggle, combined with the allure of the streets, led Al Capone to drop out of school at the tender age of 14 after being expelled for hitting a teacher. The streets became his classroom, and the gangs that ran them, his teachers. Among these, the 5 Points Gang stood out. A notorious syndicate that held sway over the Lower East Side and parts of Brooklyn, the 5 Points Gang was known for their ruthlessness and criminal activity. The gang's influence was pervasive, and young Al, eager to escape the poverty of his childhood, was drawn to their power and prestige. Under their tutelage, Al Capone learned the ropes of the underworld. He observed their operations, from bootlegging to racketeering, and absorbed their ruthless code of conduct. These early experiences were instrumental in shaping the young Capone, molding him into a figure who would soon become synonymous with the era of prohibition and organized crime. Young Al Capone, shaped by the rough streets of Brooklyn, was unknowingly on the precipice of a life of crime and infamy. From the darkened alleyways of New York, Capone moved to the bustling city of Chicago, where his name would become both feared and revered. In the early 1920s, Al Capone, then a young man of just 20 years old, left the familiar confines of New York for the thriving metropolis of Chicago. It was here that he would join forces with the notorious Chicago Outfit, a powerful criminal organization that controlled much of the city's underbelly. Capone quickly made a name for himself within the outfit, his unyielding ambition and ruthless tactics catching the eye of the outfit's boss, Johnny Torrio. When Torrio retired in 1925, he handed the reins over to Capone. This was a pivotal moment in Capone's rise to power, the moment when he became the undisputed king of Chicago's underworld. Under Capone's leadership, the Chicago Outfit thrived. He expanded the outfit's operations, focusing heavily on the lucrative opportunities that Prohibition had unwittingly created. During this time, Capone controlled an estimated 10,000 speakeasies and hundreds of illegal breweries across the city. His empire was vast, his power unchallenged. Capone's rule was marked by a mix of brutality and cunning. He was known for his strategic mind, always planning his next move, always staying one step ahead. But he was also known for his ruthlessness, for his willingness to use violence to maintain his power. It was this combination of intelligence and brutality that made him such a formidable leader. Yet, despite his criminal activities, Capone was something of a folk hero among some Chicagoans. He was seen as a modern-day Robin Hood, a man who was providing a service that the government had tried to take away. He was, in many ways, a man of the people, even as he ruled over them with an iron fist. With an iron fist and a cunning mind, Capone had quickly ascended to the throne of Chicago's underworld. His reign was one of the most infamous in American history, a reign that would forever change the face of organized crime. But as with all things, it would not last forever. At the peak of his power, Al Capone was not just a gangster, but a symbol of corruption, power, and defiance against the Prohibition law. His reign was a spectacle of wealth and influence that left an indelible mark on the annals of American history. Capone controlled a vast network of illicit operations, from speakeasies and brothels to gambling dens and breweries. His net worth skyrocketed, and it is estimated that he raked in over $100 million annually, a staggering amount for the Roaring Twenties. Capone's empire wasn't built solely on charm and business acumen. Violence was a language he spoke fluently. Perhaps the most infamous incident was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in February of 1929. 7 members of Chicago's North Side Gang were lined up against a wall and gunned down in broad daylight. While Capone was never officially linked to the massacre, public opinion swayed heavily against him following the incident. The massacre shone a spotlight on the brutal violence of gangland Chicago, and Capone, at its helm, bore the brunt of the backlash. As Capone's notoriety grew, so did the determination of law enforcement to bring him down. But Capone was a slippery character. He maintained a low profile, rarely leaving a paper trail, and his criminal activities were notoriously hard to prove. He had a knack for evading the law, often through intimidation or corruption. He was, in many ways, untouchable. But then came an unforeseen adversary. No, it wasn't a rival gang or a determined lawman. It was the Internal Revenue Service. Capone's extravagant lifestyle had raised eyebrows, and the taxmen started to wonder where all that money was coming from. Capone, who had neglected to pay taxes on his ill-gotten gains, was charged with tax evasion. In October of 1931, Capone's empire began to crumble. His evasion of law enforcement ended, and he was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. The man who had once seemed invincible was reduced to a number, his reign brought to an abrupt end, not by a hail of bullets, but by the cold, hard hand of the law. Capone's downfall was a turning point in the battle against organized crime. It sent a clear message to the underworld: nobody is above the law. Not even Al Capone, the man who once held Chicago in the palm of his hand. Even the mighty fall, and Capone was no exception. His empire crumbled not by bullets or gang wars, but by the unassuming power of tax evasion. From the pinnacle of power to the solitude of a prison cell, the rise and fall of Al Capone is a tale of ambition, power, and ultimately defeat. Behind the cold bars of Alcatraz, the once untouchable Capone faced a reality he couldn't escape. His time in prison was a stark contrast to the luxurious life he had once led. The man who was once feared and respected in the underworld was now just another number in the system. Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison for tax evasion. But it was during his time in Alcatraz that he began to suffer the effects of a disease he contracted in his youth: syphilis. The disease had lain dormant for years, but the harsh conditions and stress of prison life caused it to flare up. His health began to deteriorate rapidly, and the once formidable gangster was reduced to a shadow of his former self. The man who once ruled the streets of Chicago was now struggling to keep a grip on reality. Despite his failing health, Capone did his time. He was released on parole in November of 1939, after serving just 7.5 years of his sentence. He returned to his estate in Palm Island, Florida, a changed man. The vibrant, charismatic leader was now a frail and sickly individual, his mind ravaged by the disease. His final years were spent in seclusion. The world that had once been captivated by his audacious exploits had moved on. Capone, once the epitome of power and influence, was now a forgotten man living out his days in relative obscurity. He spent his time fishing and gardening, a far cry from his days of running the Chicago outfit. On January 25, 1947, Al Capone passed away at his Florida estate. His death marked the end of an era. The man who had once been the most feared gangster in America was now just a footnote in history. From kingpin to prisoner, Capone's life was a testament to the fleeting nature of power and the inevitable reach of justice. His story serves as a stark reminder that no one is above the law, and that all actions, no matter how grand or audacious, have consequences. Al Capone, a name synonymous with organized crime, left a legacy that continues to intrigue and fascinate. His influence on organized crime was monumental, reshaping it into a structured, business-like operation. His strategies, though illegal, were innovative, making him an unlikely pioneer in the underworld. His impact did not stop at the realm of crime. In fact, his reign led to significant changes in law enforcement and legal practices. The introduction of federal income tax evasion as a means to prosecute criminals? You can thank Capone for that. And let's not forget his immortalization in popular culture. His charismatic persona, his infamous scar, his lavish lifestyle, all have been captured and amplified in countless films, books, and TV shows, keeping his name alive long after his demise. Capone's life, marked by power, crime, and eventual downfall, serves as a stark reminder of the thin line between ambition and lawlessness.